There is a tiny cluster of pressure sensors sitting at the base of your neck and inside your aorta that most people have never heard of. They are called baroreceptors, and for decades, researchers ignored them as minor plumbing hardware. But here is what we now know. These sensors are one of the most powerful regulators of your cognitive function, your fall risk, your kidney health, and your long-term heart survival, all at once, in real time, every single time you stand up from a chair. And researchers at the University of California, San Diego, found that people over 60 whose baroreceptors respond slowly when standing have a 40% higher risk of developing dementia within the next decade compared to those whose sensors respond quickly. 40%, not from a stroke, not from a tumor, from a half-second delay in a pressure signal most doctors never test for. Yes, we are talking about that dizzy feeling when you stand up too fast, the brief wobble, the room that tilts just slightly before you reach for the counter. That feeling has a name, and it is not just getting older. And today, you are going to stop blaming yourself for it, because this has nothing to do with weakness, nothing to do with laziness, and nothing to do with your character. This is a circulatory reflex that has been silently losing efficiency for years, and nobody told you it was happening or that you could do something about it. Before we get into the science of why it happens and the 4 specific tools that can reverse it, I want to ask you to subscribe if you are not already. We are working toward 250,000 subscribers on this channel, and every single video we make is built around giving you the practical biology your doctor does not have time to explain in a 15-minute appointment. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss one. Now, let us talk about blood pressure, because you have been told the wrong story about it. When most people hear blood pressure, they think of a number on a cuff. They think of salt. They think of medication. They think of a thing that is either too high or too low and needs to be managed. But blood pressure is not a fixed measurement. It is a constant, dynamic negotiation happening hundreds of times every single day. And the most dramatic negotiation happens in the first 3 seconds after you stand up. Blood pressure is not the enemy. It is simply the force your blood exerts against the walls of your vessels as your heart pumps it around your body. That force is what keeps your brain fed with oxygen. The real problem is not the pressure itself. The real problem is what happens when that pressure drops suddenly and your body is too slow to correct it. Here is what happens inside you every time you rise from a seated position. Imagine your body as a building and your blood as an elevator. When you are sitting, the elevator is parked on the ground floor. Everything is calm. Blood is distributed evenly, your brain is fed, your heart is relaxed. But the moment you stand, gravity pulls roughly 500 to 700 milliliters of blood, about a full water bottle's worth, down toward your legs and abdomen in under a second. The elevator has fallen to the basement. Your brain, which is on the top floor, suddenly has less delivery coming in, less oxygen, less glucose. And for a fraction of a second before your body compensates, your brain is running on fumes. In a young, healthy circulatory system, the baroreceptors detect that pressure drop almost instantly. They fire a signal to the heart, speed up, and to the blood vessels, squeeze tighter. And within 2 seconds, blood pressure is restored and the brain never notices. The elevator goes back up before anyone panics. But when those baroreceptors age, when they lose their sensitivity, when the vessels they sit inside have stiffened over decades of low-grade inflammation and reduced elasticity, that signal takes longer. 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 7 seconds. And during that gap, your brain is hypoperfused, meaning it is receiving less blood than it needs to function clearly. That is the wobble. That is the gray at the edges of your vision. That is the moment you reach for the wall. That is what medicine calls orthostatic hypotension, and it affects somewhere between 20 and 30% of people over the age of 65, according to research published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society. Here's what that feels like in real life. Margaret is 67. She is a retired primary school teacher who still volunteers 2 mornings a week. She is not sedentary. She is not unwell, not by any measure she can see. But every morning, when she gets up from the breakfast table after her second cup of tea, there is a moment, maybe 3 seconds, maybe 5, where the room becomes slightly unreal. She described it once as her brain needing to boot up. She holds the back of the chair until it passes. Then it passes, and she gets on with her day. For 4 years, Margaret told herself she was just tired. She told herself she needed more sleep, more iron, more water. She reduced her coffee. She went to bed earlier. She blamed her age. Then she blamed her diet. Then she blamed herself for not exercising enough. That was never the truth. Margaret's body was running a circulatory timing delay that nobody had explained to her. A measurable, testable, improvable delay in the speed of her blood pressure response. And every tool she needed to fix it was already available to her. If this is starting to sound like your morning, hit the like button. It helps this video reach more people who are quietly writing off real physiology as personal failure. Now here is where it gets serious, because the dizzy moment is not the problem. The dizzy moment is the warning light. The problem is what prolonged, repeated episodes of orthostatic hypotension do to the systems downstream. Every time your brain experiences those brief drops in blood flow, a small amount of stress accumulates in the cerebral vasculature, the tiny blood vessels feeding your brain tissue. Over months, that stress promotes low-grade inflammation. Over years, it accelerates the buildup of the kind of small vessel damage that shows up on MRI scans as white matter lesions. These lesions are not dramatic. They are not strokes, but they are the quiet erosion of processing speed, working memory, and executive function. Research from Johns Hopkins University tracked adults over 70 with frequent orthostatic hypotension and found they experienced cognitive decline at nearly twice the rate of those whose blood pressure stayed stable on standing. Twice the rate. Beyond the brain, your kidneys are also paying a price. The kidneys are acutely sensitive to pressure changes. When blood pressure drops and your body activates the compensatory system, a hormonal cascade called the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, it signals the kidneys to retain sodium and water to bring pressure back up. This is a survival mechanism, not a problem. But when it fires dozens of times a day, every day, for years, the chronic activation of that system accelerates kidney stress, and in vulnerable individuals contributes to the early stages of chronic kidney disease. A study from the National Institute on Aging found that older adults with orthostatic hypotension had measurably faster decline in kidney filtration rate over a 6-year period compared to age-matched controls without it. And then there is the fall risk. This one is straightforward and devastating. A dizzy moment at the wrong time, at the top of the stairs, at the edge of the bathtub, on a wet floor, is not just uncomfortable. Falls are the leading cause of injury-related death in adults over 65 in the United States. The CDC reports that every year, more than 36,000 older adults die from fall-related injuries. Orthostatic hypotension is one of the most modifiable contributors to fall risk, and it is routinely undertreated because patients describe it as just getting a bit lightheaded, and doctors move on. This is not a scare story. This is what geriatric medicine sees every single week. Consider Robert, 71, a former architect who came in for a routine annual physical. His blood pressure, sitting down, was perfectly normal, 122/78. His cholesterol was fine. His blood sugar was within range. His doctor was about to wrap up the appointment when Robert mentioned, almost as an aside, that he sometimes felt off when he stood up quickly. His doctor, to his credit, had him stand. Robert's blood pressure dropped to 98/62 within 30 seconds of standing. Technically, his resting numbers were fine, but the dynamic behavior of his cardiovascular system, the part that governs actual function in real life, was failing in ways that no standard blood test would ever catch. But here's the good news. While your numbers are still in a manageable range, all of this can be stopped, slowed, and in many cases, meaningfully reversed. The baroreceptors that govern this response are not fixed. The vessels they sit in are not permanently stiff. And there are specific evidence-based strategies that retrain that reflex, not over years, but over weeks. Here's the biology of why those strategies work before I tell you what they are. The baroreceptor reflex can be improved through two main pathways. The first pathway is vascular compliance, how stretchy and responsive your blood vessel walls are. Stiff vessels dampen the pressure signal before it even reaches the sensor. The second pathway is the autonomic nervous system, specifically the speed and efficiency with which your vagus nerve and sympathetic nervous system communicate during postural change. When both of these pathways are functioning well, the correction is fast. The wobble disappears. Normally, improving vascular compliance requires months of sustained aerobic conditioning, and improving autonomic regulation requires the same. But there is a back door into both of these systems simultaneously, one that does not require a gym, does not require equipment, and does not require you to be fit to start. That back door is skeletal muscle contraction. Specifically, the rhythmic contraction of the large muscle groups in your legs and core, which acts like an accessory pump for your venous blood return, pushing blood back upward toward the heart before gravity has a chance to pull it downward. Researchers call it the skeletal muscle pump. You already have it. The question is whether you are activating it at the right moments. A study published in the journal Hypotension in 2020 by researchers at McMaster University found that adults over 60 who performed lower body resistance exercises 3 times per week for 8 weeks improved their orthostatic recovery time, the speed of their blood pressure stabilization on standing, by an average of 31%. 31% improvement in 8 weeks without any medication, without any special equipment, from activating a pump system that is already built into your anatomy. Here's your first tool. Calf raises before you stand, not after, before. While you are still seated, at the breakfast table, at your desk, at the edge of your bed in the morning, do 10 slow, controlled calf raises. Push your heels off the floor, hold for a second at the top, lower slowly. Do this before your feet ever fully bear your weight upright. What you are doing is pre-activating the soleus muscle, the deep calf muscle, which acts as your primary venous return pump in the lower leg. You are priming the elevator before you call it to the top floor. McMaster's research specifically identified pre-standing muscle activation as the most effective window for orthostatic protection, more effective than the same exercise performed minutes earlier. Your second tool is a 10-minute walk after meals. I know that sounds almost insultingly simple, but a study from the University of Exeter compared 3 groups of older adults. One group who rested after eating, one who walked for 10 minutes, and one who performed a single 3-minute brisk walk. The 10-minute walker showed the most significant improvement in post-meal blood pressure stability and orthostatic response over a 12-week period. The mechanism is this. Food digestion redirects blood flow to the gut, which compounds the gravitational pooling problem when you stand. Walking during that digestion window keeps the muscle pump active, countering the redistribution before it becomes a symptomatic drop. Tie it to something you already do. The kettle has boiled, the dish soap is drying, the news is on. Make the walk part of the ritual, not a separate task. Your third tool is lower body resistance training, not heavy lifting, not a gym. Resistance bands, bodyweight squats, seated leg presses if you have access to one. Here is why the size of your leg muscles specifically matters. Larger muscle mass in the thighs and calves means a more powerful venous pump with each contraction. A study from Tufts University found that every 5% increase in leg muscle mass was associated with a measurable improvement in orthostatic tolerance in adults over 65. Your muscles are the physical infrastructure of your blood return system. Building them is not vanity, it is vascular architecture. Aim for 2 sessions per week, focusing on squats, step-ups, and calf raises. You can do all 3 in your kitchen while your morning coffee brews. Your 4th tool is something you are probably already doing, and it costs nothing to modify. If you drink water in the morning, drink it before you get out of bed, not at breakfast, not when you reach the kitchen, before you stand. Research from Vanderbilt University found that 500 milliliters of water, about 2 glasses, consumed in the 5 minutes before standing in the morning caused a rapid and significant increase in blood pressure response speed, reducing orthostatic symptoms in adults with documented orthostatic hypotension by over 83% in the acute window. Water activates an osmopressor reflex that directly stimulates the autonomic nervous system. It is not a long-term fix on its own, but it is a consistent, zero-cost bridge while your other tools build the underlying vascular capacity. What I love about these 4 tools is what they do not require. No gym membership, no early mornings you are not naturally inclined toward, no equipment beyond a chair and a glass of water, no prescription, no cost. Just calf raises before you rise, water before you stand, a short walk after you eat, and 2 sessions a week of simple leg work that can happen in your living room while the radio plays. The ask here is genuinely small. The biology, as you have now seen, is anything but. One last thing worth mentioning, because it is real and it matters. The baroreceptor reflex is sensitive to aging in a way that is medically recognized. The condition is called baroreflex sensitivity decline, and research consistently shows it accelerates after the age of 60 as the aorta and carotid arteries gradually stiffen with age. That stiffening is not inevitable to the same degree in everyone, and it is not irreversible. But it does mean that what was a manageable subclinical issue in your 50s may become more symptomatic in your 60s and 70s if the underlying vascular health is not maintained. I am curious who is watching this. Drop a comment below with your age, not for any analytical reason. I genuinely want to understand who this channel is reaching and what life stage you are navigating. It helps me make better videos for you specifically. Now here is what the next few weeks can look like, and the years beyond that. In the first few days of implementing these tools, you will likely notice the morning wobble is shorter. Not gone, shorter. The 3 to 5 second gap becomes 2 seconds, then 1, as your muscle pump starts preloading and your morning water activates the osmopressor response. Within 2 to 4 weeks, most people who are consistent with the calf raises and post-meal walks report that the grabbing the counter reflex becomes less automatic. They simply stand and walk. The elevator gets faster. Over years, and this is the part worth holding on to, the continuous maintenance of baroreceptor sensitivity and vascular compliance takes a cumulative load off your kidneys, off your cerebral vasculature, off your heart's compensatory burden. Every morning where the pressure drop is small and brief is a morning where that renin-angiotensin cascade does not fire unnecessarily. Every walk after dinner is a walk that kept your venous blood moving instead of pooling. Year after year, those small daily corrections add up to a fundamentally different cardiovascular trajectory. The difference between sharp cognition and strong balance into your 80s, and a quiet, invisible drift toward the conditions that begin with wobble and end somewhere no one wants to go. As a next step, talk to your doctor about having your blood pressure measured in 2 positions, lying down and then standing at your next appointment. This is called an orthostatic blood pressure check, and it takes about 90 seconds. You are looking for a drop of more than 20 milliliters of mercury in systolic pressure, or more than 10 in diastolic, within 3 minutes of standing. If those numbers show a drop, you have a documented baseline to track against as your tools take effect. If you are already on antihypertensive medications, alpha blockers, or diuretics, those are all conversations to have with your provider and not with a YouTube channel, because some medications can worsen orthostatic responses and others can help, and that calibration needs clinical judgment, not general advice. If you got something useful out of this video, please drop a like and subscribe. We are working toward 250,000 subscribers, and every person who finds this channel is one more person who has access to the practical biology that makes an actual difference in daily life. If you want the condensed, printable version of everything covered today, the 4 tools, the morning protocol, the questions to ask your doctor, the wobble you feel when you stand is not a small thing wrapped in an aging body. It is a signal, and now you know what it is actually saying.